talk about America's taxes and how the tax code in this country just continues to crush the lower class Americans. Americans' tax code right now is keeping low-income Americans locked permanently into poverty. Take a look at some new numbers that are out this morning. I thought these numbers were just jaw-dropping, but I'm not surprised by it. Right now you have, look at the lowest tax bracket. Faces a higher marginal tax rate than middle-income earners. But by the way, let's talk about middle-income earners. There are really not many middle-income earners even left in the United States. You have lowest and highest. That's about it. Millions of low-income Americans right now locked into poverty thanks to U.S. tax policy. And this is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. The Federal Reserve did this study. About a quarter of lower-income workers effectively face marginal tax rates of more than 70% when adjusted for the loss of government benefits. So that means that for every $1,000 gained in income, think about this for a second. For every $1,000 gained in income, if you're in that lower tax bracket, $700 of that goes to the government in taxes. In some cases, there are no gains at all. You make the money, you literally pay almost the full amount back in taxes. Poorer families that may rely on Medicaid services or Medicaid insurance, welfare payments, food stamps, housing vouchers, tax credits that are based on family incomes, small increases in wages can bring big losses, according to this study, in these benefits. Small increases. So if you start, you get a little job promotion and you start making a little bit more per hour, guess what? Those benefits that you were relying on, down. So there's this negative cycle that the Federal Reserve points out. Again, I'm stunned that the Federal Reserve in the past few months is like coming out on the side of the people for once, in both their language and the way that they're structuring some of their inflationary spending ties, the way that they're looking at possibly being able to get a digital dollar to the American people in an emergency. I don't know if this is a sign of change with the central bank. I like to believe it is, but who knows? So it's reinforcing this negative cycle, they point out, where workers aren't rewarded if they improve their skills or their pay. So they put in the time to maybe take a night course, learn an extra skill. They get a bump in pay, and they end up paying more to the federal government. And then those at the top, those people who, of course, are earning a passive income, or they're taxed that way instead of active income, right? They're not a doctor. Doctors get taxed a lot. So when we talk about taxing the rich, that's what we talk about. We're not talking about taxing the Jeff Bezoses of the world. We're talking about tax the rich. When you hear Joe Biden talk about taxing the rich, what they're talking about is taxing doctors, people that get a W-2 paycheck, lawyers who take home a paycheck where the government can tap into that money. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about Warren Buffett. They're not talking about Jeff Bezos. They don't have a paycheck. So you're going to tax their capital gains on their selling of real estate, the selling of stock? Maybe Joe Biden's floated that idea, where they'd have to pay higher in capital gains. Chances of that getting through with a Republican-controlled Senate, good luck. All of those guys are bought and sold by big businesses. Poorer families are getting screwed. And I love what Raphael Bostic says when he looks at these numbers. He's the Atlanta Fed chair. He says, this is a perverse incentive that says you shouldn't try to make yourself better. He says they are not dumb. It's on us to actually change those incentives so that people understand what the potential is and they move forward towards opportunity. So what's happening right now is as you're trying to move forward towards opportunity, you're actually moving backwards in the eyes of the federal government. You're paying them more. Let me know in the comments, how many of you are experiencing this same thing? You make a little bit more money, and then some of those services that were there to hold you up now are gone, and now you're paying more to the federal government. Look at this story that just came out this morning. 8 million people have now slipped into poverty since May, after the federal aid has dried up. So that $2 trillion package, the CARES Act, actually kept people out of poverty. And now, according to 2 separate studies this morning, 8 million people have slipped into poverty because this Congress hasn't managed to get off its ass and pass a stimulus package. We saw, look, this isn't new information to you idiots. You guys in Congress saw this stuff back in May. When we were reporting on these stories here on the show, back in May and June, heck, we covered it in our newsletter. My little dinky newsletter had this information in it, where we knew that the effects of the CARES Act kept people out of poverty. It allowed them to pay bills. It allowed them to even start businesses, because guess what? They had $600 in unemployment, which might have even been more than what they were making at Taco Bell. They were actually able to start companies, start an online business, make a life for themselves that's not tied to this poverty cycle. We knew this information. We knew that it worked. Congress knew that it worked. And by the way, we heard Nancy Pelosi talking about it at the podium. We heard Chuck Schumer talking about it. But instead, she'd rather get in arguments with Wolf Blitzer over President Trump's signature on a damn check. And you don't understand. You're just a lowly journalist, Wolf. It's amazing. Wolf Blitzer, somehow the voice of reason. Wolf Blitzer, CNN. The reason everyone's talking about this interview is because, wow, CNN doesn't, never asks a tough question of these people. Actually dug in, and Wolf Blitzer wouldn't give up. I was surprised. He was like a dog with a bone. He was not giving up. He covered the White House for 7 years as a White House reporter before he got this anchor job a number of years ago. Usually he just kind of rolls over, but he wouldn't let go.
Spoke with the president about this.
I don't speak to the president. Speak
Why
with
not?
his representative.
Why not call him and say, Mr. President, let's work out a deal. It's not going to be everything you want, not going to be everything I want, but there are so many Americans right now who are in desperate need. Let's make a deal.
What makes me amused, if it weren't so sad, is how you all think that you know more about the suffering of the American people than those of us who are elected by them to represent them at that table. It is unfortunate that we do not have shared values with this White House, and that they have in their bill, why don't you talk about in their bill, a tax break for the wealthiest families in the country, while they cut out the earned income tax credit for the poorest families in our country and the poorest children in our country. That we have to fight with them to get them to address the coronavirus crisis.
Yeah, she wants to lecture Wolf on she knows the suffering. Isn't she in one of the most, isn't Nancy Pelosi in like the most expensive neighborhood in San Francisco? Like, isn't her like the median income of those that she represents in her constituents, like live on that slanted hill in San Francisco? Yeah. Yeah. I think like the median income of those people that she serves and her constituents, all the Hollywood liberal types that are out there for Biden. While the American people suffer, she wants to lecture Wolf about that. Get a deal done. This is what poverty looks like in the United States, and it's only getting worse. Only getting worse. 8 million people slipping back into poverty. People whose evictions now, I just watching before the show, I was getting started in the show this morning, and I'm just watching through the comments section, just watching so many of you. Someone say, I'm about to face eviction. I'm facing eviction right now. This is awful. I played for you yesterday a number of the different sound bites or different Reddit threads of people that are just dealing with evictions, loss of job, loss of income. And yet we're more concerned with lining big businesses' pockets and keeping this cycle going. It's just disgusting. We're going to see more of the same on this poverty cycle and keeping big businesses employed inside of Washington